it as well. But if for some reason we don't, we definitely will address it at the end. All right, my name is Julie Gerganis, and I am the Northeast Consultant with Digital Teaching and Learning, and I also work with the DLI grants alongside my counterpart, Lindsay, who I'm now going to turn it over to.
Hey, good morning. I hope y'all are having a great start to your day. My name is Lindsay Sight, and I'm the Southwest Regional Consultant and the DLI Grants Co-Manager alongside of Julie. So one of our projects is helping to support and manage the DLI grants, and we're excited about this ongoing opportunity for all public school units during the 2021-2022 school year. A couple of things to note. In this presentation, you are going to hear PSU, or public school units, throughout the presentation, probably over and over and over again. And this is just an all-inclusive term that represents all LEAs, including traditional districts, charters, regional, and lab schools. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded, so we just want to give you a heads up on that. All right, in March of 2021, so actually just last Thursday, the State Board of Education approved the RFP for the planning grant. This round of grants for the 2021-2022 school year and this webinar are intended to provide an overview of those interested in applying for a planning grant. So we anticipate this webinar will last right around 30 minutes. There are going to be several hyperlinks in the presentation. So again, you may choose to follow along on your own device if that is better for you, or you can watch the screen if that works for you. As noted earlier, if you have questions throughout the webinar today, please post them in the chat and we will answer as many as time will allow at the end of the webinar. For any unanswered questions, we will post them on the DLI website. So we actually have a specific page on the DLI website called Q&A DLI Doc. So we will post those questions and the answers so they're available to the general public as well. And if you have questions after the presentation or on a later date, so we're going to ask that you complete a form that's listed on the title slide here. So where it says bit.ly/DLI questions. So you'll actually go there, you'll submit your question, and then Julie and I will answer that. So Julie's going to actually post that form link in the chat as well. So if you need access to it now, or you just want to hold that hyperlink, it may be helpful to you in the future. So we hope that this webinar has many answers to your questions that you may have in relation to the Digital Learning Initiative Planning Grant. We want to make sure that we provide consistent and accurate information to all the eligible applicants, and we hope that this question and answer format helps with that opportunity so we know that everybody is getting the same answer to the questions. And oftentimes we get a lot of the same questions, so it's easy to just point folks to that Q&A part of the website. So we're going to pause for just a couple of moments so you can navigate to the presentation if you'd like, or any of the other links that have been posted, so you can follow along with just a little bit more ease. So we'll just give you a minute or two to go ahead and jump on that presentation if you'd like to.
As Lindsay noted, the presentation link is in the chat. So for those that are just coming on, if you would click on that, that will help you to follow along. I want to go ahead and share today's purpose for the webinar and want to help you understand the purpose of the DLI planning grants. We are here to support school districts, charter, lab, or regional schools. They are all qualified for this opportunity. For those who aren't able to attend, or if you'd like to revisit the information, as Lindsay noted earlier, we will have it recorded, and the recordings will be posted on the Q&A doc that she just referenced a moment ago, and that is located on the DLI Grants website. Today, we would like to provide you with an overview of the grant application, the timeline outline, the rubric for guidance, some requirements that are expectations for applicants, technical support, expected deliverables, and then some key dates and opportunities for questions.
So if you've never accessed the DTL website before, it has a whole host of really great information. And one of those sub-sites of the DTL website is the DLI grants. So if you are going to plan, or if you are planning on applying for the planning grant, I think you're going to find this website very helpful. So Julie is going to post the DLI grant website in the chat. And again, if you want to navigate to it right now, you can, or you can wait and just save that link and navigate to it at a different time. The website will provide you with some background information on the DLI grants. There are also links to Microsoft Word version and PDF versions of the RFP. You can see previous grant applications. You can see previous grantees and the amounts of money that have been allotted to them. And then there are some, pictures and different things that you can access on this site. So the RFP is going to be key in the application process. And this is the document that you're going to be using to access your appendices. And it gives you all the information that needs to be included within each section of the application. Julie, I'm not sure if you're muted, but I'm happy to take this slide if you're helping.
I got it. I had muted myself so that I don't.
She was already finished.
Just while you're talking, sorry. So many of you are familiar with the North Carolina Digital Learning Plan. We have it hyperlinked here if you would like to go look into that in more detail. One of the plan's recommendations is to provide grant opportunities to support the development and dissemination of local innovative digital learning models. Ultimately, the goal is to have effective digital teaching and learning practices spread across all North Carolina public schools. This work is also about elevating the digital learning competencies, the digital learning standards for students, and other research-based practices, especially as they relate to personalized learning. And we're going to share a few more details as we go along with that. All right, Lindsay?
Okay, so the slide that we're looking at right now is intended to give you just a very quick snapshot of the awardee information for planning grants. So at this time, we hope to fund up to 10 planning grants for the 2021-2022 school year. The amount allocated will be up to $50,000 for traditional school districts and up to $15,000 for charter, lab, and regional schools. So before we move on, I want to take a moment to emphasize these up to amounts listed in the grants. We will ask that your proposed budget be clearly aligned to your project goals, and they should be based on real needs within your PSU. So for example, it may be that an applicant realizes that their actual need is $47,000. So it's strongly recommended that you carefully and intentionally would apply for $47,000 to maximize the impact for your district. And that also helps with sustainability in the future for your public school unit.
Okay, we're going to start diving into the actual planning grants. Do want to give you some overall information. All North Carolina school districts, charter schools, lab schools, and regional schools are eligible to apply for these grants. These are one-year grants, and they must be completed by June 30th of 2022. The RFP explains that DLI grant evaluators may consider an applicant's prior performance when making final award determinations. Public school units that were awarded a DLI grant previously are eligible to apply for these grants as well. The planning grants are awarded for 1 year, as I mentioned before, and are intended for those PSUs at the beginning stages of implementing digital teaching and learning in conjunction with the North Carolina digital learning competencies and the North Carolina Digital Learning Standards for Students through the use of, and this is a new component that's added this year, micro-credentialing, coding, maker spaces, virtual reality, augmented reality, robotics, and or personalized learning as defined by the 4 pillars. So we do want to share that with you to let you know that we have expanded it this year. So now we're going to look at the rubric. We want to briefly explain the components of the planning grant application. We're going to start with the rubric because these are the parts that you want to focus on. This is what the evaluators will use to evaluate your application. And if you're following along with the RFP, the rubric is posted on pages 13 through 15. You'll note that the scale ranges from excellent to unacceptable. And as we review the components of the application, you should note that the rubric's left-hand column reflects the different components that are expected within your application. We would highly suggest that as you prepare materials for the application, that you use this rubric to guide your work and even have others evaluate your application using this rubric. We would also like you to note that we have added some technical requirements this year, such as following page limits, fonts, and margins. So it's very important that you follow those. In previous years, they were not included in this rubric, so you were not scored based on those. But scores will be reflected based on also your technical requirements and following the expectations outlined in the RFP. Okay, I'm going to share it. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay now to share about the introduction materials.
All right, so let's get started with the required application materials. The information for how to submit begins on page 9 of the RFP if you're looking at the RFP right now. Each application will have a cover page and a table of contents. The cover page is required and it's included in the RFP materials as Appendix B, and that can be found on page 16. So each application should have one person that serves as the primary contact for the district or the PSU. That person's name and contact information will be included on the cover page, and the individual who is served as will be serving as the point of contact. So, and that person will also have to sign. We will also ask for the superintendent or director's name and signature as well. On the second page of the application, that will be a table of contents. So please be sure to identify each section and update the accurate page numbers appropriately throughout the application. So we all know that as we go along and make changes, those page numbers shift. So before you go back to submitting, just make sure to double check those numbers in the table of contents. It's really important to note that the cover page and the table of contents do not count towards the total page count. Okay, so that's not going to be something that you're counting.
Okay, the next section of the application is the objectives and intended outcomes table, and this is Appendix C. If you're following along in the RFP, it would be on page 17. This item is limited to 2 pages. Again, this is part of your technical component, making sure that you follow the guidelines within these page expectations as well. This table must address the required deliverables identified in the purpose of the program. The project goal should be specific, measurable, and achievable. Through the statement of need, you will share how the goal was identified. Both the goal and the statement of need should reflect data and analysis specific to your PSU. The activities should be clearly described and detailed. Applicants should identify the time frame of the activities and clearly note the potential impact on students and/or educators. We would suggest that the activities be organized in chronological order, and applicants use this table as a timeline that deconstructs how the goal of the grant application will be met and how the final deliverables will be accomplished. The focus should be, what are the stages and steps for developing the plan for future implementation? The deliverables should be explained in prioritized order that shows a strong connection to the project's goals and activities. The deliverables are provided for applicants on page 5 of the RFP, and we'll share them in more details in this presentation as well. There may be additional items that you may identify as a deliverable, and that is okay, but you're not required to identify anything additional beyond what's expected in the RFP. You'll notice on the rubric that the first two components refer to this table. This is the first piece of information that the evaluators review. This is the big picture that will explain the proposed work. We would suggest that applicants dedicate some time to preparing clear and an organized goal, along with your activities and deliverables that mirror the intent of the RFP.
So before we move on to the next section, it's really important to note that you stick to those page limits. So for example, this is 2 pages. Last year, if we had any applicants that went over 2 pages, anything that went over 2 pages actually got redacted. So that means if they had goals and deliverables and a plan in place, some of our grant evaluators wouldn't have been able to see that information because it went over that 2-page total. So it's really important that you stick to those page limits. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the narrative description. So the next section of the application is actually the longest section, and it can be up to 5 pages. So within this section, you're encouraged to use tables, charts, graphics, or any other means that you want to share to develop the narrative in a concise fashion. The application should also identify with a strong alignment to the digital learning competencies for teachers or administrators, or the digital learning standards for students. And that should be through the use of innovative practices such as micro-credentialing, coding, maker spaces, virtual reality, augmented reality, robotics, and or personalized learning. It's also important to identify the key personnel and the anticipated impact that the grant will have on the educators or students that you're working with. And it's important that the narrative also explains how this work may be firmly embedded in public school unit's strategic plan so that the work isn't just a standalone project. So it's really blended into your PSU as well.
Okay, the next section is the local evaluation and procedures. This section is up to 2 pages. And again, you're encouraged to provide tables, charts, graphics, or other items for this description. Here you will describe clear methods and metrics for how the project will be successful. How will your PSU know that the work has been successful? What will be measured? What tools will be used to measure those things? How will it be evaluated in an ongoing fashion? In this section, the application should explain strategies for how the community will be involved and how this work will be intentionally shared with others to spread the success of high-quality digital teaching and learning.
All right, now the fun part, we get to talk about money. So let's move on to the proposed budget section. This section involves you creating a budget proposal. So if you look at page 17 of the RFP, you're going to find Appendix D, which looks just like this template on the slide deck here. It requires applicants to outline a clear, reasonable, and cost-effective budget for the grant. Again, these are up to amounts that you should be identifying for the planning grant. But we could anticipate that some PSUs may not need the entire $50,000 or $15,000 to fully develop a high-quality plan. The budgets need to be itemized, and they need to show alignment to the project goals and explanations. And they also need to include clear and meaningful rationale for why that purchase is imperative to the success of your grant.
Okay, so Lindsay shared the actual budget form, but outlined on page 7 of the RFP, it is more detailed with the use of the grant funds. There are specific allowances and percentages, as she mentioned, identified in this list and put into place to help PSUs work to meet the intent of the RFP. We tried to be thoughtful about the potential needs of what would be involved in developing a high-quality planning grant program. Please make sure that you allocate expenses for participation in the May 2022 convening for your team members. Last year and this year, we are continuing with the virtual convening, but we are very hopeful that next May we will be able to have a face-to-face convening. So we would ask that you plan for that. If something changes, we will let you know throughout the year next year for those awardees. But at this time, we would like for you to put in travel expenses for your team to come to the May 2022 convening. We do suggest that if you have specific questions related to the use of the grant funds, or if you need additional clarity, we do ask that you submit those on the question form that we noted earlier, and we can post that in the chat again. That way we can address those and share those on the Q&A form, because if you have that question, somebody else may have that question. So we post the responses up there as well, so you can go and reference. So before you ask your questions, we would suggest that you go to that Q&A form to see if it's already been answered. And if it hasn't, complete the form and we will address that for you.
There we go. Sorry.
That's okay.
My computer's lagging a little bit, guys. All right. So if you look at page 19, you're going to find the page of assurances, which is also Appendix E. So essentially, this page is just about ensuring that the PSU understands the commitment to this project and the materials submitted are accurate and complete. Also, ensuring that the grantee will adhere to the guidelines and activities that are outlined and required for the DLI grant. And please note that the primary contact as well as the superintendent are required to sign this and date this page.
Okay, the next thing are the expected deliverables. Each recipient will be expected to conduct a needs assessment through these tools: the Digital Learning Progress Rubric, the Digital Learning Media and the Digital Learning and Media Inventory, and the Landscape Survey for Personalized Learning. Now, all PSUs just went through the Digital Learning Progress Rubric and the Digital Learning and Media Inventory and had to turn that in December. The Digital Learning Progress Rubric is normally a 2-year component, so you will have to address that during your planning grant period. And then the Digital Learning and Media Inventory is an annual thing, so you will be doing that along the way as well. The Landscape for Personalized Learning is a component that is optional normally for PSUs, but for part of this grant, we do expect you to complete that within your PSU and use that data to help drive your needs assessment. You must also outline a well-developed implementation plan that focuses on the digital learning competencies and the digital learning standards for students through the use of micro-credentialing, coding, makerspaces, virtual reality, augmented reality, robotics, and/or personalized learning. Any materials that are developed are expected to be shared via the North Carolina Open Education Resources Platform, which is GoOpenNC. Recipients must reflect on the program's effectiveness and the impact on students, and will be expected to share at the May convening in the spring of 2022. If any other deliverables are noted in your application, then you will be expected to provide those as well. But as I noted earlier, they are not required. Just those components that are listed specifically in the RFP are required. If you add anything else, that is optional.
So we would also like to offer some grant planning resources to help you develop and deliver high quality digital teaching and learning grants if you're interested. So this is essentially local leadership teams thinking strategically about how to collect and analyze data and utilize the technical support resources that are provided. So the resources that we're sharing are intended to help you assess the data, align goals and outcomes in order to provide high quality teaching and learning to teachers and students. These resources are not at all required. However, we highly recommend that you use them as you're completing your grant application, and we think that you will find it quite helpful. If you would like to receive access to these resources, so you're going to sign up with the link that Julie's going to drop in the chat, or you can look at the presentation and use that link that is on the slide deck. Once you receive your access, or once we receive your request, then we will provide you with access, and you will receive an email confirming access. And this is built out in a Canvas course that is open and public. So even if your PSU does not have access to Canvas, you will still be able to access this course and utilize those materials.
All right, we are super excited to offer regional virtual office hours for anyone who may have additional questions or need additional support. So if you glance at the chart, you will see that each webinar is separated by each region. We will be hosting a webinar for traditional PSUs as well as charter, lab, and regional schools. Each meeting will have a different link. This will be an informal session that we can answer questions, share more details if you have any additional questions beyond today's webinar. This information regarding these office hours is also available on our DLI website that was posted earlier. We want to also provide you with a quick snapshot of key dates for this year. Please make note of these dates. The request for proposal application deadline is April 30th at 5 p.m. The final application will be expected to be submitted via a single PDF document and using a Google form that we will post in the chat as well as it's linked within this presentation. You will need to use that Google form to submit your application. It is anticipated that planning grant awardees will be announced at the June 2021 State Board meeting, and we're hopeful that the funds will be distributed late July. The May convening will take place May of 2022, and the year one end date is June 30th of 2022. And there's no option for carryover funds, so everything must be completed by June 30th of 2022.
Okay, so again,
go ahead.
Sorry, Julie. No, you're fine. Again, that deadline is April 30th, 2021, 5 p.m. We will no longer be accepting proposals via email. They must be submitted to that Google form that Julie just shared and is also on the slide deck. Julie and I are going to take just a moment to review if there are any questions in the chat. If you have any questions that have come up as you've watched this, please feel free to drop them in the chat right now, and we will do our best to get through as many questions as we can before we part ways. Julie, my chat is a little wonky today, so.
I haven't seen any. Vera, have you seen any? I know she was monitoring for us too.
No, I haven't seen any questions come in.
If anybody has any questions and you want to unmute, you can. That is an option, or you can ask during a regional session that we have over the next few days, or post it in the question form.
Whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yes.
So we'll wait just a couple more minutes to see if anybody has any questions, and Julie and I certainly can hang back to answer any questions that any of y'all may have. If you're skittish in front of talking in front of a lot of people, we certainly understand that. But before we go, we just want to take a minute to say thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your time, and we're so excited about the great work that's happening all across North Carolina schools and the innovative practices that y'all are going to try to harness and put into place.
Okay, there
sounded like you maybe got a question.
Yeah, there's a question now. Did you see it?
So for some reason, my settings is muted, and I keep unmuting it, and it won't really unmute. So do you mind reading it out loud, Vera?
Can you talk more about the use of personalized learning according to the 4 pillars?
Yeah, so that's something that if you you can just do a quick Google search of the 4 pillars of personalized learning. Or we can go in depth a little bit more. That's something that was one of the main focuses of the grant previously. And Julie and I, alongside of Jill and Dr. Wren, really wanted to harness some opportunities for innovation as well. So we put it as an option for you to bring that component in if you're wanting to, but it's not quite something that will be necessary, if that makes sense. So the actual 4 pillars are the learner profile. Let's see here if I can ramble them all off of the top of my head. I might be able to. Let's see, the learner profile.
I think
What
it's
am I-
see
Posted them in the chat.
position.
Jill posted it and Lauren. Yes.
Oh, perfect. I don't know what's
direct
wrong
link.
with my, thank you for doing that. I don't know what's wrong with my chat today. It's driving me mad.
I know my computer's very slow as well. But they did post it, and that's awesome. And so that gives you the 4 components, and that's what you were referencing, Lindsay.
So it's individualized learning paths, competency-based progression, flexible learning environments, and learner profiles. So likely, if you are following, if you're leaning into some digital learning standards for students, you'll probably see some overlap and be able to tie that all together, which is wonderful. Any other questions? Okay, well, Julie and I will hang back and answer questions if any of you may have them. Please join us at our regional office hours if you are able to. We would love to see you there. But we just thank you so much for your time and participation. And we certainly hope that you consider applying for a DLI planning grant. We're looking forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you. Lindsay, do you want to stop the recording? And you may have, it's just my computer's delayed.
No, I was trying to see if anybody had any questions so we would
Okay.
capture those, but it looks like nobody's had any questions yet. I'll wait, might just wait another moment.
Okay, that's fine. Oh. Carla, we see you just joined. We're not sure if you were in here earlier or not. I will post a link to this presentation in the chat for you.
We just finished up the meeting, but we are recording it and we'll have it posted on our DTL